Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan.
Hello,
Susan.
Guthrie.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Hi. You're very eager today.
I'm awake.
That's excellent. That's excellent to hear. You know, yesterday I went to a birthday party.
Yeah.
And there was a girl there who ordered a beer, and
This wasn't your birthday.
It was not my birthday. No.
Okay.
It was a friend of mine. And this girl ordered a beer.
Yeah.
And it was weird because it looked like a Belgian. It was a very bright color.
Yeah, I don't know a
very
lot
yellow.
about beer. Yeah.
But it had coffee in it.
Oh yeah. I've heard. Definitely hear that's a thing.
But this was like normally you hear of like there's like chocolate stouts or like but this one, because it was so light, I think they used green coffee beans and like infused and then just like soaked them in water and then put that water into the beer. It was very So I think it had like a bunch of caffeine, but like in a beer. It was weird. Craft beer is in a weird place.
Did you drink it?
I actually, I didn't even try it. I don't know. Oh. I don't know what I was thinking.
Is there a reason why you're telling me this story?
Well, you seem very excited. I was wondering if maybe you were drinking it.
You mean you're wondering if I've had a coffee-infused beer today?
Yeah.
No, the answer is no. I haven't had any coffee either. I actually don't drink much coffee. I do drink black tea that has caffeine in it. So that's my caffeine of choice. And yes, I've had my black tea today, but I've had my black tea every morning. So no, I think the sun is shining. And there's a lot going on.
Here.
And what?
It's cloudy here.
Oh, the sun is shining here. There's a lot going on, a lot of things happening in my life today and this week. And it just gets me all going.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So, today's topic is... Can you remember what today's topic is?
Yeah, I was just... So, I think I'm going to let you steer.
You're going to let me
today.
drive on this?
Well, this is a little more your neck of the woods.
Because we're going to talk about memory.
Yeah. Preferably if it's all alone in the moonlight.
What? What was that?
If it's all alone in the moonlight.
I don't know what that's a reference to.
That's so sad. You were in so many Broadway shows for so long.
I was about to sing memories like the corners of your mind. All right, I'll forget that.
It's a different one.
Yeah,
I was
know.
actually
what are you
doing
about?
the memory songs from Cats.
Yeah.
But I guess you never did Cats, did you?
I haven't even seen Cats.
Oh, okay. Well, then that would explain it. Why you wouldn't understand that at all. Yeah,
so anyway, Broadway references aside, I thought that we would talk about memory today. It is one of my favorite topics, you're right. And we'll even be able to connect it to the tech part of our Human Tech podcast name. So, did you see the movie Inside Out?
Yes, I did.
You remember which movie I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course. I actually really, really liked that movie. I thought it was very imaginative in a lot of different ways.
I enjoyed the movie, but I was constantly bothered by the parts of the movie that are not accurate in terms of how the brain works. Yeah. I just couldn't help it. Mm-hmm. And actually, I heard an interview with I don't know, the producers or the director or something of the movie, and they said they knew at the time that there were things they were portraying inaccurately, and they just decided to go ahead and do it.
It's hard to write a movie, much less an engaging one.
Yeah, but it bothered me, and the part that I'm referring to is the storage of the memories in the movie. So do you remember how memories were stored in the movie?
Yes.
They were in these round ball bubble thingies.
Yes.
And they were like vast caverns of shelves with all these colored balls, and that represented all the long-term memories, which they then proceeded at one point to bring out and destroy or something, right?
Yeah.
So that's not how memory works. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how memory works and some of the interesting, weird quirks about memory.
Go for it.
So do you remember?
Good joke.
No, it's not
a good joke.
It's
that was
not.
a good one. That was a good one.
I'm going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing on September 11th, 2001?
Yep.
Famously known as 9/11.
Yep.
Okay, what do you remember about that day?
Well, I remember snippets. I was in 6th grade, I think. It was 6th or 7th. I don't necessarily remember.
Yeah.
I had the same teachers and like the same class orders for 6th and 7th grade, so it all kind of mushes together.
Okay.
I remember first hearing about it. We were in English class.
Okay.
And I was on the left side of the room. I remember the teachers discussing in kind of hushed tones in the hallway. The teachers were talking, and we were just working on some project. I don't know what it was, but we were working on some project. But we the kids know when something's going on. Something's going on. And the teachers were talking in hushed tones and seemed very distraught. And then finally, when we went to science class, we turned on the televisions, and so we were just kind of watching the footage. By that time, a lot of stuff had already happened. I think it was definitely. I think everything basically had already happened except the towers falling, and when they fell, I was like, oh wow, that's pretty crazy. But I mean, on the flip side, it wasn't really a dramatic moment. We were in 6th and 7th grade, and we, instead of having to do schoolwork, we were just able to like stand around and joke around and watch TV. So, it was kind of serious, and I think it probably, but there were definitely, I don't know, we were kind of, sometimes we were like hanging on the back, like just talking, joking, like, I don't know, being middle schoolers, not understanding the gravity of the situation. And having, most kids had never really been to New York. New York was like a place, right? But, we're like 13, so like we don't really understand. In rural nowhere, it's not like it has like a, that strong of a connection because we'd never been. It was, the place like any other place. So that's
your memory of it. Do you remember anything else about the day or what you were wearing or what anybody in particular said or?
No,
okay.
Nothing specific. I do remember specifically one of my classmates though definitely said that Bush did 9/11 and it was an inside job. So I think pretty sure that happened. That's a joke, by the way. That was a political humor joke.
You mean that didn't happen?
That was
okay.
A joke. No, I don't remember anything about what I was wearing. I don't remember anything about my brain, just fills in the details for some of the other stuff. I remember the black tables in the science class, so that.
Okay.
But we had those tables for forever, so it's not surprising. Okay. But I just remember I remember where the TVs were in the room.
Okay.
But that's about all. Yeah, I don't, so did we turn the TVs on when I was in English class before we went to science? I don't remember. It's possible. When exactly was I told? I don't remember.
Okay.
I just kind of remember like these kind of 2 or 3 moments.
Okay.
And that's about it.
All right. So and we're recording this in 2017, so that was, 15 and a half years ago.
I know. Everyone's old.
Now, I have another question for you.
It's a lot of years. Yeah.
Can you tell me what you remember about April 20th, 2009?
2009.
Mm-hmm.
So September 2007, I was a freshman. Which means April 2008, I would have been a freshman. Which means April 2009, I would have been a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
So I was living in the Christmas tree house.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in a patio. It was probably a little warmer. If I knew the day of the week, I'd probably know a little more. But yeah, no, of course, I without getting a reference point, without understanding more.
You don't remember anything about April 20th, 2009?
Yes, a very nondescript day. And I couldn't tell you anything about September 10th, 2001, or September 12th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Those are
right.
just days.
And the reason that you can remember some details about September 11th and not September 10th or September 12th or April 20th, 2009
because something happened.
Is because something big happened.
And not only something big, though. Here's the other thing. Mm-hmm. I remember big things happening all throughout lots of time. The only difference is that it's not globalized. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So because you have to have it globalized to know the date. The only reason I remember the date is because we celebrate it every year, right? So I know this happened on a specific date. That's the name of the event. But if it's not globalized in any way,
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah, but it's not just the globalizing. Okay.
Well, no, I mean I have to so for example, okay?
If I asked you what you were doing on July 4th of 2012, you're not. I mean, that's a date that is celebrated every year, and yet you're unlikely to have particular information about that date.
I could figure it out, actually.
You could figure it out. You can go back in time and maybe figure it out. But if I go back far enough,
but again, that's a globalized date. That's because it. You just have to think of the fireworks memory in the certain spot, and you can kind of get back there. The problem, but again, that's because it's July 4th. It happens every year on a specific date. So, for example, I remember in high school a couple, sports teams winning the state championship, for example, right?
Yes.
I know probably, maybe I could figure out the month it was in, right? But what exact date was, I mean, I don't know. It's not, it falls on a different date every year because it's,
it's
the
not
Thursday
the global,
of the third.
But I'm going to tell you, it's not the global nature that makes you remember, although that might help in some memories.
Well, I don't think I remember any specific days. I could tell you what happens on any specific day if it wasn't tied to a global event. Basically, some national holiday or my birthday.
Well, what's actually more important about it is that it's tied to an event that had an emotional charge around it. Even if it wasn't for you an emotional charge, it was an emotional charge for other people. Like you said, the teachers were huddling in the hall. You knew something was up. And even though you were in 6th grade and maybe it wasn't particularly important to you because, like you said, you're in middle school and New York's a long way away, there was enough of a emotional charge amongst other people around you and enough discussion of it. And as you said, enough discussion since, right? That you're not buying this.
Well, let me ask you a question. Okay.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been in a car accident?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And you remember the car accident pretty clearly?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What day was that?
I cannot tell you the date.
See, this is my point, right? The day, do you I can remember the event very clearly, but but actually knowing the date, it's kind of irrelevant, really.
Yeah,
and I'm
not talking about knowing the date. I'm just talking about the clarity of memory.
Okay.
When there is an event that has a strong emotional component.
Okay. Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, for example, I can't tell you the date, but I remember, in college when I did poorly on a test.
And that was and for you, that was a strong emotional content because you didn't usually do poorly.
Right.
I
For
other people, perhaps who do poorly on tests a lot, that was just another normal
taken
day.
The easy version of calc.
For you, engineering calc? That was a big deal. Yeah. So when memories are surrounded with strong emotional charge, they get encoded in a different way in our brain.
Okay.
And they seem easier to retrieve, and they seem more vivid than other memories. And even when you were trying to figure out, what you were doing on April 20th, you were like following you were attempting to follow a chain of associations. It was really interesting, actually, what you did, because you said, let's see, I would have been a sophomore. I would have lived in the Christmas tree house. So it would have been April. It would have been a little warmer in my room than it normally was. So you were doing a combination of logical suppositions plus some memory, but that's a different experience. Even the memory of it is a different experience than remembering a particular event that had an emotional charge. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here is just the fact that we have different kinds of memories, and there are different ways we encode what we know. For instance, if I ask you, who was the third president of the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Which I don't know if you know or not. Do you know?
Okay, so, boy, this is, and I really should. I'm
not sure I know. So.
Okay, Washington. Well, let's see if we can do this. Washington was number one.
Yeah.
Then it was Quincy Adams.
Okay.
I believe then it was Jefferson who was number 3, and then it was Quincy Adams again. But there may have been someone in between.
Yeah, I don't know either, and we can look it up. But that experience of remembering that, oh, look, he's looking it up. I can hear him typing.
Shh, I'm not typing.
I hear you typing.
I'm not. No, it's just a figment of your imagination.
And the answer is. What's the answer?
Yes.
Thomas Jefferson?
Yes, I was very close. I thought 4 was maybe Quincy Adams again, but so it was Washington.
Yeah.
Adams.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Then came James Madison. I always think he comes later.
I figured James Madison was in there.
James Madison, James Monroe.
Right, I figured Monroe.
And then John Quincy Adams.
Yeah. What you
and
really
then we
need
hit Andrew Jackson, and we're in the.
You probably could just run through the streets in downtown Chicago in order and figure it out, but because they're named after the presidents. However.
Van Buren, Harrison.
Yeah.
Taylor, Fillmore. No one remembers Millard Fillmore, by the way.
All right, just stop. So that's a different experience, remembering information like that. So there's different kinds of information we have, and they're stored in different ways, and they're encoded in different ways, and the experience of remembering them is different. Here's what's interesting, though, about the personal memories, what's sometimes called episodic memories, which are your personal memories. So rather than remembering that Thomas Jefferson was the third president, that's not an episodic memory. That's just a long-term fact memory. When you do that, and the kind of memory I was talking about, that where you remember an emotional event, that's called a flashbulb memory. I don't know where these names came from. What we know about episodic or flashbulb memories, so not the fact stuff, but the other stuff particularly, even some of the fact stuff, is that oftentimes our memories are false, or they're partially true and partially false. They are very subject to errors. And even when we replay a memory that's episodic, or especially a flashbulb memory, it seems very vivid and very clear. And a lot of our memories we have about particular events in our lives, it feels like you're running a movie clip back in your brain. It's so clear. And yet they can often be false, or totally false, or at least partially false, or mostly false. And it still seems like, no, that's really what happened. I can see it. I can see it in my head. So interestingly, like I said, in the movie Inside Out, our memories are not stored It's not like there's a certain place in our brain where the memory of a particular event is stored. We actually recreate our memories every time we retrieve them. We actually refire neurons and it's as though the memory were happening. It's as though it's happening again. I mean, that because there's actually neuron firings in your brain, and but because of that, the neurons can fire a little differently the next time and the next time, the next time, based on other events and other memories and things you believe or don't believe. So you can really end up with memories that seem very real but aren't. There was a professor at a university that did an experiment where the day after 9/11, he had his students write down, their memory of that day. And then 10 years later, he tracked them down and asked them what they remembered of the day. And then after they told him, because they all, remembered, oh yes, I was doing this, I was doing that. And then they showed them the essays that they had written, the papers they'd written the day after. And the two did not match.
Right.
And in fact, one person said, I wouldn't have even thought I had written this, except it is my handwriting. So, yeah, so it's interesting. Our memories are really faulty. This is the whole thing about, eyewitness testimony. I mean, you're a lawyer, right? What did you learn about eyewitness testimony when you were in law school?
I generally that is pretty bad. I didn't take a whole lot of trial stuff, so
you didn't get a lot of it.
So I didn't get a lot of it, but yeah, for sure, definitely like that. Everyone's lying and it's no one believes it and all kinds of stuff.
But a lot of times people really think it's the truth. I mean, they're not necessarily lying. I mean, I'm sure people lie, but a lot of times in eyewitness testimony, they're telling what they absolutely believe is true, and they're like, yeah, this is really what happened.
Well, I know all my memories are completely garbage because a lot of times I can see it from my from a third person view. You know what I'm saying?
Is this another Guthrie's brain is strange episode? Yes. What do you mean you can see it from a third-person view?
So when I talk about the September 11th stuff, it's not from my eyes' vantage point.
You see yourself.
Not necessarily that I see myself, but really it's like I maybe from the perspective of like a drone overhead. Okay. Right? Like I can't see myself and see what I look like, right? But
so that gives you a hint that maybe this isn't accurate because
If it was completely accurate, then every single memory I should ever have should be from the perspective of my eyeballs and include blinks and me looking around.
Yeah, and our memories are usually not that way. You are right.
So obviously it's putting together a three-dimensional room that I can then have fill in some holes and gaps in. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So, wow, there's so many things we could talk about memory. I mean, we could talk about how memory is encoded and what you need to do to remember something. But actually, let's talk for a minute about some interesting stuff about forgetting. Because there's remembering and then there's forgetting. So, one of the things that you do during sleep, sleep in itself is weird, right? Mm-hmm. Like, all the mammals on the planet just have this point at which they, either lie down or fall down and go unconscious, right? I mean, that's strange. And it happens every day. I mean, that's a strange concept. To me, that's a strange concept. And there's a lot we don't know about sleep, but one of the things we know about sleep is that your brain, while you're sleeping, is kind of running through everything from that day and deciding what to remember and what to forget. So forgetting is interesting too, right? I mean, we have to forget stuff or else we would get overloaded with remembering things and we couldn't function. So that's one thing about forgetting. The other thing about forgetting, do you remember? Okay, sorry about all these movie references. I just love movies. The Internal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Did I give that right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
That was a long time ago. And in that movie, it's about a company that you can hire to erase particular memories in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, which was very kind of sci-fi when it came out, but actually you can do that now. I mean, I don't know of any commercial companies that are doing this, but it is possible to erase a particular memory in your brain. And there are basically 3 ways to do this. One is with chemical. So there are drugs you can take that actually don't erase a past memory, but they prevent you from remembering anything that's happening now. And we use some of those drugs in surgeries.
Yeah, it's a really good thing.
Yeah, so that you cannot remember anything about the surgery. So that's one way to erase a memory, is just to prevent it from forming. But there are also other things that can be done. One is with electrical stimulation, and the other is with light pulses that can actually kind of disrupt the electrical signal of some neurons. So when, for instance, if I had you, all hooked up to machinery and asked you to remember an event, I could see your brain activity, and you could actually see the neurons firing. So if you're very, very, very careful, and this is not easy to do, and it does require like a neurosurgeon, you can kind of zap those neurons as they're firing and disrupt the neuron firing chain, and thereby disrupt the memory, kind of zap it. So this is being experimented with for people who've had like really traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
That you could go in and just kind of get rid of one particular memory. So there's, your next tech company, Guthrie. You could do that, right?
Just take my $1 billion in funding and, just kind of...
I think it would take a lot of funding. Well, I don't know. You just got to... You'd have to go back to school and become a neurosurgeon. That's what you'd have to do. All right. Now, here's another thing about forgetting that I find really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you walk through a doorway, that triggers forgetting. Did you know that?
Well, I did, but I don't think many people know that. But I knew. Yes, I knew that.
Oh, you knew that because I told you that, or you'd read that? Or?
Yes, you've told me this.
So it does. We'll see how much you remember. About this. So does it matter how big the room is in terms of how much, whether you forget or how much you forget?
I don't remember.
Because you could walk through a doorway in the room. It takes you 2 feet to get to the doorway versus it takes you.
I can't recall.
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Just it's the act of the doorway. And here's another question: if you're playing a game, okay, like a video game, or a computer game, and you're a character in the game, right?
Yeah.
And you walk through a doorway in the game play.
Yeah.
Will that also trigger forgetting?
I plead the fifth. I'm gonna assume it will.
It will.
Yeah.
So there seems to be this weird effect about walking through doorways. Makes us forget things. I guess it's adaptive. I don't know. I find that kind of odd and interesting. But, I like these odd and interesting things. All right. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. I like to put you on the spot.
I'm fine with that.
You need to ask me a question about memory. is there anything about memory that you've kind of always wanted to know? Any kind of memory?
I mean, that's pretty tough, putting you on the spot like that.
Yeah, go ahead. I may not be able to answer it, but you could try. Can't remember anything,
Okay.
can you? Yeah?
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready.
Why are some people better at remembering different types of media than others?
You tell me what you mean by the question.
I'm really, really good at remembering things I watch and especially listen to. So
Yes.
I can remember music really, really well. And I can, if I like see a movie, I basically can like often I can remember very specific details about the movie. I can remember like scenes very well, and that's why it's no fun for me to rewatch shows and movies, because I know what's going to happen. It's just no fun.
Okay.
But I don't remember dialogue very well. The dialogue part is just not there. So it's not like I can play it back and hear the dialogue, what they're saying.
Yeah.
But I can, but I'm really good with songs, and so maybe I can't remember the lyrics, but I can remember the guitar solo. But and then also with movies, I can remember a picture, and I can kind of remember what's on the screen, but I can't remember what they say.
And can you, so you said you can't remember the dialogue, but you said you do remember music very well. But let's go back to what you said about lyrics. So do you think that's true, that you're better at remembering the melody than you are the lyrics?
I would, yes, much better.
And I think that part is true of many people, that the melody is easier to remember than the lyrics. But
even but not just like the chorus that repeats 4 times, but like specifically like a guitar solo, for example.
Yeah.
That's kind of all over the place and you don't really know what's coming. I could.
So there are individual differences in this is interesting, because this is where sometimes you'll hear people talk about, the left half of the brain and the right half of the brain, and they might say, oh, well, that's because you're a right brain person, and that always drives me crazy. I think I've mentioned that before in a previous podcast, because I did my PhD research years ago on the theories about the left and right half of the brain. And you do have a left half of your brain and you do have a right half of the brain, but it's not true that some people are left-brained and some people are right-brained. We have 2 halves of the brain, and they do some things differently and some things the same, and they're constantly communicating with each other anyway. So it's not really like you're a left-brain or a right-brain person. But when people say that, and I go crazy when people say that stuff, but when they say that, typically what they mean is they're referring, for instance, to a learning style, to a modality preference. So when what you just described is a modality preference, and there are individual differences in this. So there are some people that either prefer to receive information visually versus verbally. Or they remember information, they remember stuff better if it's visual versus if it's verbal. And the words versus so you could say, well, but you said that you can remember a melody, and that's auditory, so why can't you remember dialogue? Well, so there's visual and there's auditory and there's kinesthetic, which would be touch and movement, but there's also, if we can talk about auditory, but auditory, words is different than music. So in your brain, where music is processed is different than where words are processed. Also, interestingly, someone who has been trained in music, who, for instance, has learned from a young age to play a musical instrument, processes music differently in their brain. If you could see, so you have someone who was trained in music, and I happen to know that you played violin to start with from the before you were 3, and then you played other instruments. So someone who's been, formally trained in playing music, if you looked at their brain while they were listening to any piece of music, whether it was one they knew or not, their brain activity is different than someone who did not have, hasn't had many years of training. And so someone who's been trained for a long time in music, when they listen to music, they have, you would see their right brain being active in terms of the emotional content of the music and the overall pattern of the music. But you would also see their left brain active, analyzing, for instance, particular rhythmic patterns, and perhaps analyzing, things about key and tonal intervals, and all other kinds of things. And you might even see, if they played one instrument for a really long time, you might even see motor, as they're imagining playing that on their instrument. So versus someone who's just loves music and is listening to a piece of music, and their brain is going to react differently to it. So anyway, back to your question. It sounds like one of your preferences about information is a visual preference more than a verbal. So you have auditory because of the music part, but not as much verbal. So it's just some people are, more attuned to one preference over another. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm very verbally oriented. So I'm actually, my whole visual memory and my whole visual sense, that's for me the worst of all my senses, to the point where I'm constantly surprised by things I see that, I've lived in the same house for a very, very long time. And there are times when I walk in a room and see something that I never realized was there. And it's been there for literally decades. And I've been in that room for decades, and I never noticed, just something about, the way the wood is on the window, or, something. It's like I never noticed it before. So I am just not a particularly visual person. That's not how I take in information. So that was a good question. Yes, thank you. You're welcome. And I even had an answer. Maybe I made it all up. You don't know if it's true or not, but I had an answer to it. So do you have, for instance, so one question I have for you is about your memory. Do you remember things easily? Like, I know you've done a lot of school. I'm really good at forgetting things. You're good at forgetting things? You mean once you have learned them? Yeah, but that's a good thing. But what about, like, memorizing stuff for a test? I'm actually a mixed bag. Yeah. I'm bad at memorization stuff. Yeah. Specifically, but I'm really good at learning things. Oh, that's interesting. So if I can tie it to, if I can tie a concept together, then I'm really, really good at remembering it. But just memorizing facts for, so a couple hours. Yeah. So like if the question was how do these things fit together? Yeah. I can probably remember that. I'm pretty good at remembering stories. So a lot of law school stuff, right? I think of like the fact pattern. Yeah. And I'm like, I remember like the story, right, with the guy and the case where you can't do that. But then it's a lot harder for me to be like, right, so like what year was so and so, unless I can like tie it to something else. What's especially hard, I guess, when it comes to the law, especially when you're writing for the bar essays, which I guess I did okay. I don't really know why. But there are you get points for saying the right stuff, and you get points for saying the right thing in the right manner. Essentially. So basically by requoting things verbatim. So if we're talking about I had to know all the common law murder stuff.
And so common law murder, right? So there's like a felony murder rule, which is something a homicide committed with like malice aforethought, a reckless indifference to human life. There's like these little catchphrases.
Yeah.
And again, I can remember like small ones, but there are longer like paragraph writ responses that you just need to know.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember them verbatim, where some of my friends were very good at remembering them verbatim.
Well, that kind of fits too with what you said about not being able to remember dialogue particularly well. So if it's just verbal, it sounds like you may have a more difficult time encoding that. And the part that you said, if you can tie it to what you already know, so what we the term in memory that people use is called encoding, encoding. And so there's lots of different ways to encode information so it sticks in long term. Some people need more structure to encode information than other people do. And you mentioned stories, because that's a way that we encode information, right? Is by telling it through a story, because our brain reacts differently to stories than just factual information. And in fact, stories are kind of the natural way our brain processes and stores information. But so that's and encoding, and everybody will remember something better if they encode it better. But it's just that we have different ways and different. There's certain methods of encoding that are better for some people than others, and that's one of the reasons that school can be so tough. Is that sometimes it depends on your teacher and the subject matter, but sometimes there are very specific methods for encoding that the subject matter or the teacher or the school is using, and that doesn't work for everybody. So some people have a really hard time with that. So we kind of reward in school certain types of information processing and certain types of memory encoding. And if that's not your best method, then you may not do well in school. And it doesn't mean that you're not smart or that you can't remember information. It's just that, we don't necessarily have it set up for you, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that school does a lot of is what's called, school really works your working memory, the short-term memory, and how fast can you get stuff encoded into long-term memory from short-term. And people that are particularly good at that tend to do well in school, because that's just, you got a lot of information thrown at you, right? And you have to get it into long-term memory as best you can and as much as you can. So, yeah. So let's see. The future of memory and forgetting. I mean, I think that having everything available so fast on the internet has maybe changed the requirements for memory. I don't know that we're as impressed these days with people that can remember like lots of stuff, because except for school, do you really need to remember all that?
No, you definitely don't. And it's, I mean, and this is there's the whole thing about the bar, because essentially you're being no lawyer needs to memorize anything. Like every single lawyer who's doing law work looks up the statutes.
They're not going to do it from memory, right?
Yeah, why would you need to memorize what the Illinois ILS 204, why you don't need to memorize that. You look it up. That's That's the whole point. So, but the idea is, well, in order to be a good, I mean, it makes more sense if you're like a doctor, right? Who like, or like a surgeon, you know, where like there's a patient like on the table, like bleeding out. Like you just need, you need to, there's certain things you just like need to know how to do. But,
well, and there's just certain things you need to know and remember. You can't go look them up. It's not even know how to do, but you need to know that, this particular organ or this particular bone is next to that one, right?
Sure.
I mean,
there are things you need to know as a lawyer, otherwise you'll be a bad lawyer. But the specifics of it, right? Like I think it's much more about analyzing problems, but that's not what they test you on. So why do you
think they do that? Are they just trying to,
I don't know,
filter people out?
Filtering. How else are you going to test people? There's there's one part of the test now called the MPT, which is basically it's not based on real law. They give you like, this is the town of like Fictionville, right? And here's and so they give you like a bunch of different, in quotes, court cases, right? And laws, unquote, and it's like 2 court cases and 2 laws, and then they give you like a set of facts, right? So like Mary's come into your office and she complains that so and so did this and this, right? Your boss has asked you to draft a memo to to this other corporation stating draft a memo back for Mary to let her know what her standing is if she decides to move forward with like legal action, right? But all the laws and stuff are made up. So if you were a lawyer for 40 years, right, it doesn't help you because it's not based on law in real life. It's, you have to go and look in the statute, and it's a much better way of determining, right? It's kind of like you're problem solving, and like you actually have to do like legal stuff, right? And then turn those thoughts into a paper and an idea and like concise writing, and it's a much more
so it's more about if you've learned
how to law
rather than about particular laws.
Exactly. And so that's cool. I think that's a good step. Of course, the only problem is that that's only 7% of your bar score, right? The other 93% are for and it's still the other problem they run into is that the law is different in every single state, and then it's different in every county, and it's different in every municipality. It's just like depending what jurisdiction you're in, there's different rules, and people analyze things differently. People use different systems, and so if you're designing a test that you have to give to every single person in 35 states, you can't just base it on Illinois law or what Illinois uses, and then of course that changes every couple of years, and you have to redo the whole test. So you end up kind of defaulting to for the Illinois bar, you have to know a lot of common law, okay? No one uses common law anymore for the common law felonies. No one uses common law felonies anymore, but you have to know it because that's what they assume is the law on the bar. Because some states still do, and you just anyway. So it's it's just weird. The whole thing is weird. So I think it's much more of we're just trying to get a curve. We're just
trying to figure out a way to.
We're just gonna make your life as miserable as possible, and if you're good enough, you'll pass.
But it is true that there are some.
There's something the constitutional law stuff. I totally get.
Yeah, there's some things that it's important to just know, and you need to have learned it well enough that you don't have to look it up. And
yes. And a lot of the constitutional stuff.
Not only if you're a surgeon, but just
procedural law stuff, and absolutely. But it totally changes from state to state. That's the problem.
Right. That is the problem. That is a problem.
And I'm not it's in one state it's you have 60 days to file something. In one state you have 45. It's okay. So for example, Illinois is if we look at property, okay, property is one of the 8 core subjects on the bar. And property in Illinois, we have the kind of classical version of property law, right? So if you get married, okay, you own your stuff and your spouse owns their stuff. And you can kind of like mix stuff together, but right? Like that's just how it works. But in Wisconsin, it's a community property state, randomly. So community property, like as soon as you get married, you're considered a single entity, and everything is owned exactly split even between the spouses. So like just starting from that simple spot, like every single thing is different. The entire every single law is different. The analysis of every single thing is different. The rules of how you determine what's what is different. It's just totally different, and it just depends if you're on the Illinois side, if you're on the Wisconsin side. So
do you think? Yeah. So it's interesting.
Anyways,
I mean, I wonder.
ranting.
I wonder as we move forward, through into the future and with new technology. I mean, putting aside what the schools are gonna say you have to memorize and so on, I wonder if the whole idea of knowing things long term, encoding information into long-term memory, maybe that'll just start to disappear. And maybe with
it's starting to in law schools.
Yeah, and I mean it's I don't know that that's hit. I mean, we had some podcast episodes about education, and I don't know that that's hit yet.
Can I give an example?
Yeah.
So I took, when I was a 1L, I took civil procedure, and the rules for civil procedure are pretty difficult. They're well encoded, but they're pretty difficult. And the nice thing is they are standardized across almost all states. I think maybe all states. And the federal, in the federal level, so it's the federal rules of civil procedure. And and back in the day, when you took a final in law school, they gave you like a pencil and a piece of paper, and it was like, have fun. And nowadays you can use your laptop, but they use very, very smart software that locks the entire laptop down. You literally cannot do anything except basically have a Word document open that's taken over your entire operating system. Very intrusive software, but it gets the job done, right? So you can't have it. Like your internet connection literally
you can't go look up any other information.
You can't change tab. Like you're completely locked down, even though it's your laptop. So it's essentially the same thing. But a bunch of years ago, they used to just hand you a piece of paper and a pencil, and so you had to have memorized all the rules if you wanted to get the answers right. And when I took, we had a great teacher he was kind of like a bulldog, where he would sit in a chair in the front and just kind of scowl and then randomly call on people and ask them rules and see if they had read cases and stuff, and then berate you if you had. It was great. But that was definitely the exception, and that was an insanely hard test because you had to basically memorize all the federal rules of civil procedure, which are onerous and difficult and like very, very arbitrary and specific, right? So like, there's certain, right? So like after you file, an answer to a motion, you have, blah, blah, I don't even remember it anymore. But, you have like 60 days to do this.
Well, that's interesting. You don't even remember it anymore.
Well, I had to memorize it it's like, right, like one is 60 and the other one's 24, and then there's like, but it's like, it's 24, but then if it's 30 if it's in this case, and it's just very complex. I just remember all of my poor 1Ls were just like, weeping in corners as they were trying to memorize 120 pages of rules so that they wouldn't fail this test. The vast majority of tests I took afterwards, if there were large amounts of rules that we needed to memorize, they gave us the pertinent rule. We could take the rule book in. So like when I took my final for evidence, okay, much in the same way of the federal rules for civil procedure, there are the federal rules of evidence. and they're standardized and codified. But when we took the test, like we couldn't take in any notes, but we could take in the rules.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're like, oh yeah, I think maybe you can use this rule for this question. So it's a lot less memorization and a lot more analysis.
Yeah.
But and that's definitely changing already. The flip side is that people from back in the day would say, well, law school's much easier now.
Yeah.
And they would probably be correct. Because
yeah, and it's
just a lot of work to memorize stuff. It's really hard.
When I think about memory and computer design.
Yeah.
So years ago, when we would design screens for software, a lot of what we were trying to do in the design of the screen was reduce how much people had to remember. And I think these days, I don't know that people realize that a lot of the advances in interfaces, in computer interfaces in terms of ease of use, a lot of the reason that stuff is easier to use now than it was, let's say, 30 years ago, is because you don't have to remember as much stuff. So it was really common, because way back when, and I don't know how, you probably don't have much direct memory of this, but way back when, you'd be looking at a computer screen, and there would be all these initials and acronyms, because you couldn't scroll, so you had to fit as much as you could on one page, and so they would just have an acronym.
Yes, that's right, guys. You had to remember what you'd seen because you couldn't scroll.
It's true.
If you
and you couldn't click and get a drop-down list of stuff. I mean, there was abbreviations. You had to know what the abbreviate. You're looking at a field on a screen and it says ACR, and instead of the whole name, and you had to remember what the heck ACR was, and then you had to remember for the ACR field what the allowable text codes to type in were. And so, I mean, there was no drop-down menu, and if there was a help, that one of the first ways to fix this was with a help system, but then when you pressed on help, your screen was replaced with the help screen because we didn't have multiple windows. And so, then you'd have to try and remember what it was you were looking up, and then you'd look it up in the help screen, and then the help screen would go away, and you'd try to memorize what code you wanted while the screen refreshed and came back. I mean, so a lot of why software, and it's software because there weren't websites, that didn't exist, but a lot of the reason that software was hard to use was because it really taxed human memory. And a lot of the advances that we have now in interaction technology and computer design are because we have things that allow people to not have to remember. They click the drop-down box and choose the allowable answer, or the text field name is, you get the whole thing on the screen instead of having to know what the abbreviation is. So there's entire generations of people that don't appreciate how much better things were. I mean, I know that you like to play around with like Linux and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that sometimes you can go into a mode of interacting with the computer where it's just a command line, and it's just a blank line. And so
I really like working with the command line.
You like working with the command line,
and it's so funny because a lot of people in the community, in the dev community especially, you would think people would be like, oh yeah, we can definitely do better, and like everyone just wants to do everything in the command line.
Well, because as long as you know what you're doing,
it's super fast.
It's fast and easy. Yeah,
and powerful.
I mean that was true way back when if you were really techie, you loved the command line. But the problem with the command line, of course, is that it's just a blank line staring at you, and if you don't remember what to do, or the syntax, or the you're not going to be able to do anything. So yeah. So memory, relieving human memory, has made computers easier to do. All right. I think we're done. I think we've, well, we're not done talking about memory. I could talk about memory for hours, but I think we're done with this podcast episode.
All
Talking.
alone in the moonlight.
What are you singing?
You know, I never liked cats, but when I was in high school and I did like the state competition. Whenever there was anyone singing, like 4 times out of 5, they would do that stupid song. That was really bad. I just was like, ugh.
So that's something you remember.
Sadly, yeah.
Here's to our memories, and here's to forgetting. And I think we've used up a whole nother hour. Okay, so what do we want to tell people?
Buy our courses.
Okay, fine. Buy our online courses. Well, you know, okay,
we have
wait
new
a minute.
ones.
Wait a minute. I'll do a pitch because we have new courses, and we have a course on that is called, I think, Thinking in Memory. And it's part of our new brain and behavioral science curriculum. And so if you're interested in memory, you could take that course and learn about even actually stuff we didn't even talk about here. So if people want to reach us and send us their memories or anything else, how do they reach us, Guthrie?
You can email info@theteamw.com.
Yeah, info@theteamw.com.
Let's see. What's something you're excited about that's happening soon? I'm very excited for Rick and Morty season 3. That's what I'm looking forward to. What are you looking forward to?
In life?
In the near
world?
future, yes.
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward. It sounds like I know you and I are taking a trip to San Francisco to speak at the Habit Summit in San Francisco. I'm looking forward to going to San Francisco. I haven't been there in a little bit, and in the summer we're going to Paris.
So work. You're looking forward
Sweden.
towards work. You should.
I'm looking forward to travel. Okay, what am I looking forward in my personal life?
Work was a fun answer. I was just...
I'm doing so much work. I forget. I'm looking forward to spring. I'm looking outside the window here.
That's good.
We had a snowstorm yesterday. So
You know, it sprinkled as well.
with snow? Where you are?
Yes.
Yeah,
It obviously did not stick, but
it did more than sprinkle. So I am looking forward to spring. My view as I'm talking to you, I have a view out the window of my very nice backyard, but basically right now it's it's fairly dead and lifeless. So I am looking forward to a view out the window where I get to see green things growing.
That's a good answer. It's a good answer.
All right.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Everyone, thanks for listening, and hope you have a great week.
And hope you remember what we talked about.
Eh.
Bye.
I won't take it personally. Bye.